Welcome back, everybody, to We Are TPM with myself, Kyle Teixeira. Sitting across from me, as usual, is the big old John Teixeira. We are here this week to talk about evictions post-COVID. If you like anything we talk about, want to give us a call, hire us to evict somebody, or do anything else on the phone call, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. Let's get into evictions post-COVID.
I wanted to talk about evictions post-COVID, but first I need to address that introduction. I'm sitting next to you, not across from you. And why do I have to be big old John Teixeira? Why can't I just be like normal size John Teixeira? I mean, I realize I
meant like a big deal.
Lose a few. Oh, okay.
Big deal,
all right, I got it. Now,
like the big deal.
That helps my ego a lot. Yeah. I like it. Thank you.
It's kind of a big deal.
All right, post. So why are we doing this? The last time we did evictions was right in the middle of COVID, and it was strange, and there was a lot of things different. We were doing rent relief. We were doing timelines were different. Courts were acting different. Everybody was trying to figure out
we were restricted
a new world.
From evictions and stuff like that. Yeah. So
how are we back to normal, Kyle?
There's a new normal.
A new normal.
It seems that's kind of why we're discussing it. It's a new normal, and this is more of a. I guess we can't really avoid this being more of a Homer conversation of our market here in DFW, because eviction rules and changes and everything
is different everywhere.
It's going to vary post-COVID a lot as you go through the country. But we're talking about Texas here in Tarrant County, Dallas County, all this, which you would think is because it's in Texas, it's more on the conservative side, and it's been there's definitely been changes. So I'd say it's been an interesting thing to see. The COVID restrictions, COVID-19 restrictions still being applied to eviction laws here in Texas in 2023. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to take it back to COVID, to give us some context, during COVID, it's like we had two worlds in our market, isn't it? We're in a market of kind of two big counties. There's other counties, but most of our market is in two big counties, Dallas County and Tarrant County, which basically is like, Dallas-Fort Worth, right?
Pretty much.
And they both operated in extremely polar opposites. Like the federal government came down and said, you do this. Tarrant County practically ignored what the federal government told them to do. Dallas County went in the opposite direction and went overboard with a 21-day thing and all kinds of stuff happened. So
and to be fair, that's the city of Dallas that did that. While there's Dallas County and they apply the rules, there's more happened in the city of Dallas where that's like true. You said, there's a 21-day notice to let the tenant know that they're going to be told.
And that's gone now, right?
No,
it's not gone.
It was reduced
still there
this month actually, to a 10-day notice.
Okay.
And it's not a notice to vacate. It's a notice of, intent to evict, and that there's help out there, notice. and to try to make a payment arrangement. All the things your lease already says.
So let's talk about that. How we do things versus what has to be done, because this is kind of the first step of the process, right? When you're doing an eviction. So it's been our policy as a matter of principle, I think, just as a matter of our standard operating procedures on how we want to run our business with our tenants, to give them what we call a 3-day pay or quit. It's kind of what the notice to vacate used to be back in the day. And so it's basically a notice that says, hey, we're giving you three more days to pay, or we're going to take the next step. Mm-hmm. And that next step is the notice to vacate, which is what the court is the only notice that the court requires and asks you to prove in court when you're in court. And I point that out because the 10-day Dallas notice that you just mentioned is kind of like that, right? It's kind of like an extension of that, just longer, right? It's kind of like that first notice that we choose to give.
Yeah, because the 3-day notice is a property code. It has to be done. It's part of property code to follow the property code's procedure. So they're kind of putting a notice in front of that is what they're doing. They're saying, well, yeah, you still have to do that one legally, but we're going to make sure that you have to do this one before you even do that one.
When you say it's property code, you're referring to the notice to vacate.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Notice to vacate is in the property code. The property code specifies the specific ways that you have to serve notices and do things in order to properly file and execute and get judgment for eviction.
All right, so we got into the weeds a little bit here, right off the bat.
Yeah, we did.
Let's kind of give everyone an overview. What does the eviction process look like? We give this notice. In our case, we give 2 notices. Okay.
There's a lot of timelines. Yeah. Well, yeah, like 3-day pay or quit. That's not a property code notice, like you said. 3-day pay or quit. So all you have to do is give a 3-day notice to vacate. And it needs to say in words, notice to vacate on it. That's the only restriction. There's now, I think after COVID, we finally have a standardized one from the state of Texas that you can use, but it doesn't have to be used. Like, it just has to have a date of delivery, 3 days. There's a specific manner. The property code says that you have to deliver these notices. Like, you have to hand it to them. You got to post it to the inside of the door. If you post it on the outside, you have to mail it by 5 p.m. You can certified mail it. These things have to be done specifically and in the right timeline because there are technicalities that get cases thrown out.
Has to be written important documents on it if you leave it on the outside of the door.
Yep, in an envelope. And the tenants out there have probably we've had tenants that get have literally claimed that those notices are harassment, knowing that the eviction's coming and that's all been communicated and they're okay with it, but they see the notices as harassment because it embarrasses them. And we all the time have to explain that, we legally have to do that. I'd prefer not to have to do that, but, because you could email them or text it to them, and get confirmation that they got it, and it would save everybody a lot of...
Can you do that? Well, have you ever asked a judge if they will accept that? If you send it by email and they respond received, would that be legal notice?
No, and of course judges, as we have seen, can make their own decisions to a certain degree under the law, right?
Yep.
But no, it's the method of delivery is specified in property code. Like, you can put that in your leases. You could try to get away with that has in your lease that this method of delivery supersedes the requirements of property code and tenant signs off on it. Sure. I'm not even saying that's not valid. But I would argue that you can't walk into every courtroom with absolute certainty that a judge is going to accept that,
Yep.
And every judge is different. In Tarrant County, we got 7 precincts.
Yep. They all operate different.
They all operate differently. And I know what I'm getting from experience based on which judge I'm going in front of. But
unless there's a fill-in judge.
Yeah, unless there's a fill-in judge. But even they all operate differently. That's why.
Yep.
But one thing that doesn't change is the required process. So if you follow that required process, you seem to be, in general, you should be okay.
Yeah, I think to your point, just follow the letter of the law and you're good. I think we email those out not to give legal notice, but as a courtesy so that they get it as fast as possible. So we email all of our notices in addition to delivering them the way they want them delivered by the letter of the law.
Well, we started this as eviction post-COVID, and kind of the mindset behind that is because of how much COVID changed, not just the eviction process itself, but the mindset. The mindset and the bringing of evictions. So during COVID, this is what a lot of people don't realize unless you were really a property manager or property owner or tenant sometimes. During COVID, we started having to file evictions on tenants for their own good. It was the weirdest thing ever. We were being asked to file evictions. We were being We were using the eviction process
Rent
to help
relief
people
was asking us to do
because
it.
because you couldn't get all these assistance programs or even start the process unless you were under eviction. So these people that needed assistance were like, all right, well then you need to start the eviction process against us.
Right. Or they were so inundated. I think mostly, Kyle, to your point, it's not that you had to do it to start it, but they were so inundated that they would put those evictions first in line. So if these people wanted to get the assistance, they had to be under eviction.
Well, and it became part of the game. Because we had a moratorium. Those evictions weren't actually going to finish being executed. We weren't going to get judgment because we couldn't get judgment until that expired, which during COVID was like a year and a half later. But even after that expired, it still became this process. I mean, we've said we thought that this would change for assistance programs. Assistance programs, at least here, just stopped like 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I think it was little mid-summers when they finally ran out. And that's who's telling if they, renew those again. They've done it like 5 times. But, that's where it's became like all these courts. I've never seen them so busy with eviction cases. There's a full docket every morning. They got afternoon dockets. I went to a night court a couple weeks ago. I've never been to night court. We literally had eviction court at 6 p.m. It's like I don't know. It was different.
Okay, so I know we still need to get into the rest of the process, I guess. But what do you make of that, Kyle? Because I was sitting here thinking how previous to COVID, we're trying to do post-COVID, right? Previous to COVID, we probably did less than 5 evictions a year, and now we're doing 2 to 5 a month.
Yeah, and maybe filing 2 to 5 a month.
Yeah, they don't all come to fruition, and we'll talk about that.
There's a huge range of what people that get worked with and don't. With property managers. I mean, while we're in eviction court commonly, I still think it's probably 2 to 5, maybe a little more that actually lose possession of their home or forced to give up possession of their home, because again, this is part of the process.
So let's go through the process. Let's go through the process and see if we can help people be prepared for the eviction process. Okay. Yeah. So we've given them notice, and let's assume through this process that you're not getting payment, but yet you're trying, because you and I were constantly trying through this entire process to get payment, because that's the goal. The goal is not to throw somebody
arrangement or something.
Yeah. The goal is never to throw anybody out on the street. That is just the instrument we're using to get ultimately what we're trying to achieve, which is getting payment.
Because you're enforcing a contract, and at the end of the day, if you can't get, there's different cases, but if you can't get communication out of the other party, I guess most of the time when we're in file evictions or go to evictions is because of lack of communication. It's unresponsive. Mm-hmm. You don't have a payment plan. You either haven't even communicated with us, something like that. So it's like you said, it's part of the process.
Yep. So we've given notice. We go to the courthouse. We file. We don't even have to go to the courthouse all the time anymore. Post-COVID now.
So one best thing COVID did for evictions is e-filing.
E-filing.
It's not because it didn't exist before. It was something they didn't really allow. So.
I'll tell you this: it takes longer depending on the court that you're with. Each court is different. So I'll tell you this: I have a couple different experiences. One, if I wanted to go to the court that's nearest us, it is about a quarter of a mile away. And when you walk in there and get stuff done, it's extremely easy to get stuff done with the clerk. They all know what they're doing. They're pretty efficient. I could probably get up off of my desk, drive to that courtroom, walk upstairs, go to that clerk, file that eviction, give her my money, and leave in about the same amount of time or maybe less than it takes me to e-file it. Because it takes a good 20 to 30 minutes. They make you jump through all these hoops. That's not true with every courtroom. I've been to other courtrooms where I'm thinking of another court in Arlington where they run you through this whole rigmarole, and they have 3 people review it, and it's just ridiculous. You're standing there for 30 minutes while you're waiting just to file something that you've done hundreds of times. You know how to do this, and they act like So every court is going to be different because they all operate differently. But the point being, the e-filing is easier because you don't have to get up off your desk. But it's not always easier. I mean, sometimes if you're doing this on a regular basis, it's easier to go look at people face to face and get things done.
Yeah, they all operate differently, but like there's one that
how much
takes
does that
me
cost?
3 hours when I got to go file.
$126, right?
I think it's $75 to file, and then another $50 to serve every adult on the lease, something like that. So
$126.
No, but 130 something, 133.
I wasn't too far off. I think it's $126 because that's what I recall seeing all the time. But
I mean, to be very specific, we're talking about Tarrant County here for the most part. This is the process we're going to talk about in Tarrant County, so that it applies. Because after that notice you file, you have to wait till after the notice expires to file that, and then the court's going to give you a hearing within 30 days.
Given notice, we've gone to the courtroom, filed. The whole time now we are still trying to make arrangements and still trying to communicate with our tenant, hopefully. If you're not doing that, you should be. Again, don't use this as a means. Use this as a means to get collection. I've gone to...
Yeah, because eviction sucks. Nobody wants to be evicted. We don't want to evict anybody.
Exactly. We don't want to be there.
So,
how many times have you had the judge how many times have you heard a judge say that to one of our tenants in the courtroom, that I know these people and I know that they don't want to be here and they're only here because you forced them to be here?
Yeah. You sometimes get props for it, but that's not really what you're looking for, right? They just know you're someone willing to work with people. When you're resetting cases or trying to, because all this stuff has effects on the tenant, right? When you file an eviction, when you win an eviction, you get a judgment. That judgment is on the record, right? Next, other landlords and stuff are going to see that. So there's ways to get those removed or released, and if you get them paid. That's why communication and everything we say, communication is so key.
Yep.
Because without it, you have nothing.
Yep.
You have no money and you have no information.
So what do we got to do to prepare for court? We got court coming up. We have a court on a certain date coming up. And what do we need to prepare for?
You need a copy of the lease. You need a copy of the notice to vacate. You need a military status affidavit that says that they are not active duty in the military, because while this never occurs, a little loophole in property code is you can't evict active duty military. So if they're on orders and not home or deployed. So you need those things. And that's pretty much it. You don't need a whole lot more than that. You need to know lived up back rent. So they only give you judgments for not all fees and any of that stuff. They give you judgments for back rent lived up through the day of court. Today I was in eviction court, and it's a lot easier when you're on the last day of the month to figure that out. It's the whole month. But if it was the 3rd or something, you have to prorate 3 days of that month, and then however far back they go. It doesn't matter when it was due. The court only cares about lived up rent.
And court fees. They add the court fees also. So the $124 or something, whatever that is.
And you can request attorney's fees. I did hear the biggest request for attorney's fees that I've heard actually today. I didn't even tell you. They asked for $1,500 in attorney's fees for that 20 minutes they were in court. The judge, he awarded them $750 after laughing at them a little bit. So.
That's funny. Wow. So that's our value.
And then you get the judgment has interest, right? So when interest rates are high, you currently on any judgment that you get, I think it's 8.5% right now. Interest. You didn't know that? You're looking at me like you didn't know that.
I do not know what you're talking about. You collect interest. Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
They award
interest
you
accrues. Okay,
yes, they award you interest. So if tenant if that judgment doesn't get paid for 6 months, you can tack on interest. Not saying that
But
happens.
you have to refile it probably in order to do that. And I got it. I got it. So, all right. So now you're prepared. You're in the court. Well, let's get back to preparation a little bit, because one of the keys to court is this. You said it earlier. The judge is there to enforce a contract. So she's there, he or she is there to help you enforce a contract by how it's written and by property code, right? And so people walk into court with all kinds of emotion, and they lose sight of why they're there. You are there for eviction. The plaintiff, you and I, are there to attain possession of the home and a judgment for past rent, period. That's all we're there to do. The tenant is there to make a case why they should retain possession and maybe not get a judgment, right? That is all that they're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
Judges cannot stand when the tenants come to the table and all they want to talk about is how they were treated by this tenant, how they're didn't do repairs, how maybe they're racist, maybe they're all these things that tenants come to they jump to a lot of conclusions, they bring a lot of emotion to the courtroom, and that's not why you're there. So it's important to know why you're there and to make your case appropriately.
Yeah, I don't think I think every judge in these cases repeats it repeatedly and gets very frustrated repeating it because people still talk about the repairs. It's always repairs or conditions or something in the house. And there's two parties here, right? There's two parties to this contract. There's the landlord and there's the tenant. The landlord has the ability to file an eviction for non-payment of rent and it be about an eviction for non-payment of rent. The tenant has the ability to file a repair and remedies case and it be about repair and remedies and why you're not paying rent due to repair and remedies.
In a civil court.
In a civil court, same action, similar actions, but they never do that.
They think that they can do it there at eviction
that
court.
It applies there, yeah, and it doesn't.
And it doesn't.
And the judge, even if the judge agrees with your points, they are an elected official to do a job. They're there to enforce the law of a lease, right? Like the one judge I knew you were probably talking about, the way she handles her courts when they are contested is interesting because it makes it very clear what it's about. She asks the plaintiff, 3 questions. She says, do you have a valid lease with this person and is it properly named? Did you deliver notice to vacate on so-and-so date and was it delivered properly, and how much of this rent is owed, right? Those 3 questions are the 3 things up for question.
And that's what you need to be prepared to answer.
Yeah, exactly, and answer and prove.
And by the way,
there is a 4th that she has brought up before. If it gets contested, it never gets contested, so you don't have to prove it. But the 4th point is ownership. If you have the right to even sign a lease with this person,
right.
But that would be this is a very rare case that ever gets addressed. So really those 3, and the tenant basically answers, she asks the tenant, are their records correct? Are those 3 things correct? Because
if they are, then that's the only issue.
That's the only issue. Yeah.
And so if you take those 3 things that you just point out, that is also how you want to prepare your case if a judge, like I'm thinking about another judge, who I'm talking about, who will say, okay, you stand up there, plaintiff's there, and the tenant's there, and he just looks at you and says, okay, state your case.
That's how we present our case here. Get legal advice wherever you're at.
Well, you're there to retain possession and non-payment of rent is kind of where you begin that, and then you state those facts like as you presented them. We presented notice to vacate on such and such date, and this is how we did it. We have a lease, executed on such and such date for this amount per month, and this is the amount owed to this date. Period. That's all the judge wants to hear.
Yeah, and then so I think there's always timelines that tenants don't know, right? And one of the most common one is what happens afterwards. They get 5 days.
That's
right?
what I thought was going to be interesting too. Yes.
Yes,
I think afterwards is the most interesting part of all this.
Yeah, and it's knowledge is power. But they get 5 days, right? So when the eviction judgment happens, you get five days. You got to be out by 5 days. Nothing past that judgment happens until the plaintiff takes more action. So that fifth day isn't the day a constable going to show up. If you don't get red tagged, that fifth day is the last day that you have basically the legal right to willingly leave. That's on that sixth day that the landlord or the plaintiff can come in and say, I need a writ of possession, which is a request for the constable to go assist regaining possession of that home.
So if you're doing an eviction, and you've never done one before, you need to know that walking out of that courtroom doesn't accomplish what you want to accomplish. It only gives you the legal right to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Getting a constable there to actually, hopefully you don't have to, but forcibly drag somebody out of their home is what you need, and you're not going to get that done without that judgment in the courtroom. Now the constable has the ability, when you file that writ of possession, to help you.
Yeah, and one of the biggest timelines on still working with people, because obviously, at least in what we do, we're trying to collect payment and don't want people to be removed from their home if we can. There's timelines after this. So my judgment for possession, and this is where it gets a little different. You got a judgment for possession and money. A judgment for possession is good for 60 days. For 60 days, I can come into that courtroom or come back to that court and ask for that writ of possession.
Actually, you just go to the constable's office.
No,
Don't you just file it there?
No, you file it through the clerk. Clerk verifies your judgment and sends it to the constable. But regardless, there is a 60-day period, so they don't have to do it on that 6th day. They can do it all the way up to the 60th day. They can even request an extra 30 days from the court. So there's a 90-day period, at least here in Tarrant County, there's a 90-day period after the judgment and eviction that you could use, whatever way you want.
So depending on where you are, that's what you want to ask is, how long do I have to file a writ of possession in my county or in my state or whatever that is? Because that's an interesting timeline that we use a lot to continue that collection process. Again, we talked about how this is not something where we're trying to get somebody out on the street. We're trying to accomplish getting their balance caught up. If we can do that in that 60-day period of time, and we can come to some agreement, because now we're talking to the tenant, and now they realize we're open to it.
Yeah, and it's like we're enforcing a contract. If we didn't enforce that contract, we'd be breaking our own contract. We're contracted by the owners, and we have a contractual obligation to follow this process through. So knowing the timelines and the process and all that is so important in us being able to effectively do what we need to do, right? Or do that process for our clients when we need to. Ideally, you don't want to do that. So, and we more often than not avoid it. But it has changed a lot post-COVID, so I think that's important. And, some of these relief plans, when they ended, evictions became a lot more commonplace it was surprising to me, at least, to see some people get their rent paid for an entire year, and the second that ran out,
they didn't have any money.
We'd have to go to eviction court the month after that.
They got free rent for a year, and somehow they don't have any money. It's crazy.
I mean, I'm just saying that is the shift that happened, and then when you have floods of evictions and move outs, and then you have floods of people moving into new places, and then and then the economy goes the way it's going and things get expensive, these things become more common. So it's definitely changed.
So let's talk a little bit real quickly about, I don't want to go into this too much because it's actually kind of heartbreaking, but
oh yeah, it is.
The moment that we have to force somebody out, we file that writ of possession, they're refusing to leave, and we need possession of the home. This is probably the single worst thing that we do. And fortunately, we don't have to do it very often. It's the thing we look forward to in our job the absolute least.
It's the worst part of our job, for sure. I mean, but it is a part of our job at the end of the day. Yep. But it's also why we try to make it more human, at least on our side. I talk to other property managers who are like, you go to court yourself. I can't stand that. I send a lawyer, and I'm like, I go to court myself, so that this isn't just more crossing I's and dotting T's. You know, like it so that we have a hand in the worst part of what we do, so that it doesn't get it at least gets done to the best that it can be done.
You don't need an attorney to do what is it, $750? If we got paid $750 for each one, that'd be great. But we get what? Nothing.
The person was taking $1,500, so I mean, it was more than the judgment that they got for rent. It was impressive.
I say nothing. It's part of what our clients, we choose to make it part of what our clients pay us for.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you want to beat up evictions anymore? We don't like them, but
no,
they have changed.
We don't like them. We were going to talk about force outs and
oh yeah,
and so that's
the
road
set
going
outs.
down.
So basically, that's how evictions go. When you have to take a constable, is they show up and
you set an appointment with the
supervise.
constable. They post and they let them know 24 hours before that I'm coming back at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and then the constable comes back and he stands there and he supervises while we literally take contents out on the street and put them on the sidewalk, usually where the constable tells us to put them. He usually helps manage that process, and he'll walk in and say, well, the house is clear, it's all yours, or he'll say, okay, we need to pull all this stuff out and put it here, and then we usually have a crew there that's ready to go, and our handyman there rekeying the locks, and and he usually gives us about an hour to do it. I think one time we needed
2
that full
hours.
hour. Is it 2
hours? Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, so the constable helps us, guides us through all that, and he basically stands there and helps us and protects us. And sometimes we've had instances where the tenants show up in the middle of it and causes a big issue. And man, I've been thankful the constable's there sometimes. And it's just a horrible experience to take somebody else's contents and put them on the street. It makes you shake your head at why they allowed this to happen, but they did. And here you are doing it. And goodness gracious, if you're ever a tenant, take the eviction process seriously and don't make somebody else have to put your stuff out on the street. And it's a horrible, heartbreaking process. And then it has to stay there for 24 hours. So if it rains, it's raining all over their stuff all day, all night, or until they get it.
Yeah, there was one time I even asked the constable, I'm like, can we just, because it was a weird weather day, and we were like, can we just load all this into a moving truck for them, and whatever, and we couldn't do that. Like, we legally had to leave it.
I think one time he let us put it under a carport behind the home because there wasn't a good place in front of the home to put it, and there was a carport there, so we were able to do that.
It's just weird because, at the end of the day, whether either party, whatever side you're on, these laws are very specific. Property code's very specific. It doesn't leave much room for vagueness. That's why this process is how it is, right? So the constable has to do the same thing. They have to do it in a very specific way.
But the constable is going to want to make sure, if you ever have to do one of these set outs, he's going to want to make sure that you have enough people there to do it, and that you have somebody there to change the lock. And we've even seen them have to literally not kick in a door, but they use one of those ramming devices to open up a door.
Well, that was interesting because they brought marshals because the person that was evicted had a warrant. So they were like, oh, when we put in the request for a constable to come, they were like, they brought the marshals with them so that they could execute their warrant. It was weird. It was very weird. So, luckily for them, tenant didn't show up until about 2 minutes after the marshals gave up waiting and left. So it was wild. It's a weird process, but this all comes regardless if you know that possession is going to be regained. There's nothing more valuable than voluntarily giving it up or communicating that you're going to volunteer. I mean, you could buy yourself a couple days if you tell the landlord that you're voluntarily doing this. If you
called us and said, hey, I've got a moving truck that can come Thursday. I can't get out by tomorrow, but he's coming at 8 a.m. on Thursday. I would rather wait one more day to see if that comes to fruition than to show up on Wednesday and put your stuff out. So just call and ask.
Well, and there's one judge that makes this known, but good move out by property code can be done prior to eviction court. And this is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see tenants make is they show up to court and they're like, I moved out. I've moved out. They can have it back. Let's not have this eviction on my record. And these judges tell them there's like one thing you could have given them the keys and surrendered the property before that court starts. That eviction has to get dismissed. That's part of the rule. If it's been given back, you can't have a case for possession. So, but it has to be given back properly. So they're always like, well, I've left, and then it's like, well, unless you gave them keys back and gave them this property back, it can't be.
So you could say that, okay, do you expect tenants to know all these little details on the law? But I would say to that, no. You don't expect everyone to know these things, or maybe even it's difficult to go learn it all. Maybe I don't know. It's not, but let's say it is. Isn't it some common courtesy and common sense on what you do to give somebody's home back, to hand them the keys and say, here, I cleaned it. It's ready to go. It's the way you gave it to me. Just the point is, have some human courtesy for somebody else's property. Really is what it comes. That's the law really correlates really well with that.
Well, do yourself some favors, and if you got to leave and the situation's not good, at least avoid the eviction judgment on your record and the eviction going through if you can. So, just give it back.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about replacement tenants. We've had lots of people do that before, and that's a different podcast that we've done. And you can do that. You can make arrangements with your landlord.
And we've never had to set out or actually execute an eviction on anybody who was communicating with us. I've thought about it. Before this, I thought back, and I'm like, no, it's never been someone who was it's always been someone who was completely not communicating with us. Maybe the only communication I had with them was when they were in court yelling about stuff that I didn't understand. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to think back on them all, but unfortunately, I hate that we have the experience that we have. But I
remember every one because it's like you said, it's not what anyone wants to do. So.
Yep.
But I think we're good on this, right? You got any questions on?
I think we hit evictions post-COVID pretty good.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you don't have to do one, and if you do. Maybe you should have a great property manager who knows exactly how to do it for you.
Because the process is important.
Yes, sir.
Stages are important. And if you want to know how important or get it done, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. And we are out.